Okay, so we are all being formed by something, right? I think we'd all probably agree with that. We're all being formed by something, by our families, our friends, our enemies, our successes, our failures, our culture. In my case, personal trainer Paulie. By what we've been praised for and what we've been criticised for. By political and societal narratives. And of course, by the choices we make ourselves. We are being formed by something. Each and every one of us. So the question that I have isn't about whether or not we're being formed. The question is who or what is forming you. I've been on staff here, as I said, for 14 years. I've absolutely loved every second. I think most of you know, and if you don't, apologies, here comes it. I'm about to leave. I'm not going far, God willing. I'm only going down the road to lead a church. But 14 years. And the dear staff team have had my reflections on this the other day. But I've been here 14 years, and when I turned up here, I was really broken, that's the truth of it. I absolutely believed I wasn't going to ever be loved. I'd kind of grown up with this narrative of that. I thought it was wild they trusted me. I was the kids worker before Angie. I thought it was wild they trusted me with these kids who are incredible. I thought it was wild that people let me talk about Jesus because inside of me, I was really broken and uncertain. And when I first joined the staff team, I just didn't talk to anybody. I would stand at the side of church just to observe what was happening. I would sit in the staff room and I would be completely quiet. I didn't talk to anybody because I was just uncertain. And what I really wanted to know was, what is the culture of this place truly? What are the values this place actually stands for? I wasn't really interested in what was being preached from the front. I wanted to see the lived out actions of the community and of the leaders and of the staff team. And I wanted to understand, do you mean what you say you mean? And the truth is that I discovered that they really did. Not perfect, absolutely not. But they did mean it. They meant it when they said, come and be healed. They meant it when they said, we're going to pray for you. They meant it when they said, we can grow in our relationship with Jesus. And I will be forever grateful to the leaders and people that call this place home over the years, the past people and the present people, because I've seen and witnessed that they really do believe what they preach. And that has been an utter joy. And so I agree, this place is a gift. It is a gift because you can be who you are, but equally be formed into the person that God is calling you to be. I would say that our core values as a church, the ministry and the power of the Spirit, evangelism, inclusion, and interculturalism, they really do shape who we are and what we are as a community, what we stand for, what we believe. And they have a fundamental impact on us. But I would also say the reason we believe in those things is because of the life of Jesus, because of what Jesus stood for and who he was. And really all we're ever trying to do is follow in the footsteps of Jesus. And so when we think about discipleship, what we're actually considering is, who are we being formed into? We're considering the crux of the human experience. To be human is to change, to grow, to evolve, and this is God's design for us. And so formation is happening, whether you choose to pay attention to it or not. Are you being formed accidentally or intentionally? Are you being formed by the world or by Jesus? And I hope the truth would be we're actually being formed by both. I think that's probably the lived reality. Discipleship is the intentional formation around a person. In the first century, in the time of Jesus, discipleship looked like being formed around a rabbi. And so what would happen to the Jewish children is they would go off to Bet Sefer. Do not correct my Jewish and Hebrew words here. It was called the House of Books, and children would memorize the first five books of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. I find that wild, honestly. Anyway, if you did that well, you would then move up to the next level. You would then memorize the whole of the Old Testament, all of it. And then, if you were the best of the best, the creme de la creme, then and only then would you possibly get the chance of studying under a rabbi. We're talking about the elite few here. The elite few. And you would go to a rabbi and you would say, please, could I be your apprentice? Can I be your disciple? And if the rabbi thought you had the knowledge, the discipline, the character, then maybe they would say, come, follow me. And you would leave home, you would leave everything, and you would follow this rabbi. You would be with them and you would learn from them. But when we look at Jesus and we see who he calls, he seems to have an altogether different benchmark. In Matthew 4:4, it's going to come up on the screen, we see Jesus calling his first disciples. And it says, as Jesus walked along the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. At once they left their nets and followed him. Going on from there, he saw two brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left their boats and their father, and they followed him. The key phrase is when Jesus says, come, follow me. We see the same in Luke 5, where we've got Levi the tax collector. And it says, after this, Jesus went out and saw a tax collector by the name of Levi sitting at his tax booth. Follow me, Jesus said to him. And Levi got up, left everything, and followed him. Notice the movement of the disciples. They step away from what has been defining them, and they begin to be with Jesus. So what are the requirements to follow Jesus? It's pretty simple. He says in Matthew's gospel, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Whoever is the key word in that sentence, I would say. Fishermen, zealots, tax collectors, a betrayer, Torah scholars, sex workers, religious bigots, adulterers, the intellectual elite, blind beggars, and everyday people. Whoever can come and follow me. You see, discipleship begins with being with Jesus. It's why I found the stories that we just heard so moving. Being with Jesus. And if we want to be formed by Jesus, if we want our lives to reflect Jesus, if we want to know the hope of Jesus, then it's more than just turning up on Sunday, which I would argue we probably know. It's spending time with him day in, day out. When I rocked up here 14 years ago, I would watch people, and I would see the ones that seemed to be used by God. You know, yes, the Johns and the Eds of the world, but people like Kat Beals, this person called Janie, and they would just seem to be on fire for Jesus. And they would pray for people and seem to have the most insane, accurate words of knowledge. They would pray for people and see people healed. And I knew this because I used to follow them around. And I would stand really close as they prayed. I wasn't doing the praying. They were praying, and I was watching. And I just became quite obsessed with it, being like, what is going on here? How are you able to do this? And I started quizzing them all individually, and they all pretty much gave me the same answer, which was, we spend time with Jesus daily. That's actually where it began, in the private, at home, by themselves. And so I started to model what they were doing. I was so hungry to be used by God. For me, I start each morning with Jesus. I currently have a devotional book. I've been doing it since the 1st of January, and I am on track. Come on. Thanks, everyone. I feel really proud of myself, I'm not going to lie. But Jesus is big enough that when I forget to do it, he's going to forgive me. But I start my day with Jesus. It has a little short Bible passage. It then has a little reflection. And then I pray. And I'll be honest, I always start by thanking God that he's my father. And if you know my story, you'll know why that's important to me. I thank God that he's my father. And then I spend a bit reminding myself of who God is. And I speak out loud. I'm not going to be able to pray in my head. It's not my kind of person, but that's great if it's for you, what's good for you. I spend a while doing that, and then I move on. I pray for myself first. I'm not going to lie. I pray for the people I love. I also pray for the people I don't love. I pray for the things that I've been asked to pray for. I pray for my job. Currently, I pray for the life course, for the team and the people, day in, day out. I trust God that he is there with me, that he's listening to me. I have a particular chair in my room that I like to sit and pray on. It's become a bit of a habit for me, and I think Jesus is there with me. I spend time praying with Jesus. And the truth is, I'm a nicer person when I do so. I'm kinder, I'm more generous, I'm more gracious, I'm more compassionate, I'm more filled with love because I spend time with the one who loves me first, who's kind towards me, compassionate towards me, generous towards me. If you're just starting out, I'm irrelevant of how long you've been a Christian, but if you're thinking, I don't really spend time with Jesus day to day, can I encourage you to start? And the reality is it probably will feel clunky at the beginning, possibly even like hard work. But I'd encourage you to begin. The amount of time you spend with Jesus at the beginning, I think, is irrelevant. But I think it's actually starting to do it. And the truth is, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. The more you do it, the more natural it becomes. I think the more pressing question when we're talking about being with Jesus, and this has been alluded to in the stories, is what stops us from spending time with Jesus. Why don't we do it? Shame, pain, rejection, disappointment, lies, a distorted view of who God is, a distorted view of how God views you. I think one of the most common reasons that we don't spend time with Jesus or we're really slow to return to Jesus is us related. 2 Corinthians 3 verse 18 says, we all, who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, are being transformed into his image with ever-increasing glory. I love that verse. We all with unveiled faces. We stand before God fully known. Unlike Moses in the Old Testament, who had to turn his back when the glory of God went by. The problem is, though, that all too often, myself included, we think we're not worthy. We can't stand before God. Be it something we've done or something that's been done to us. And so the problem then is we're distant from God. We're unable to be with Jesus. If you've been at St. Mary's for any length of time, you'll have heard us say it's 1 look at yourself and 2 looks at Jesus. 1 look at yourself and 2 looks at Jesus. It's why I, along with other people, the songs that we sing here that are like, I know I'm unworthy. I know I mess up. Trust me, I am not perfect. I need to know who God is. I need to be reminded of God's very nature, that he comes close. Before I was working here, I lived with a bunch of Christians. Some of you have heard me tell this story before. I lived with a bunch of Christians, and I knew I believed in Jesus. Absolutely, I did. I definitely did. But I wasn't ready to live as a Christian. I didn't really want to be going to church. And but my friends that I lived with rudely used to invite Christians back to our house and hang out. And they wouldn't tell me when this was always happening. It just used to happen. And I'd come home from work, and there they would be. And I knew the polite thing to do was to go round and smile at everyone and be a bit nice, and then go off to my room or go to the pub, which was the more likely option. And then there was Jenny Hoyle. And again, you might have heard me tell you this, but I couldn't be near Jenny. Not because Jenny's perfect, I need you to know, but because she knew Jesus, and I knew that she knew Jesus. And the truth was, when I got close to Jenny, I would feel completely unworthy. I couldn't be near her. She was the only person there that I just couldn't be near. In fact, I'd throw her dirty looks. She's here tonight, which is why I'm slightly laughing. But I'd give her these dirty looks because I'd just be like, please don't come and talk to me, please don't come and talk to me, please don't come and talk to me. The truth is, had I just been a little bit more maturer, I would have gone to speak to her. And I know Jenny now very well, and I know that I'd have been met with love and grace, not judgment. I might have been judging myself, but I don't think Jenny would have judged me. I think she would have met me with the love of Jesus. Because she knows what it is to mess up. She knows what it is to be forgiven and loved by Jesus as well. She had a profound impact on me. And it was only years and years later that I was able to tell this story and tell Jenny. Forever grateful to you, Jem. Forever grateful. Who are the people that are like Jesus? Or who are the people that you think, I'm not worthy enough to be near that one? They are holier than thou. I promise you they're not. I'd go chat with them. Last year, the year before maybe, me and John went over to Nashville to visit a church, and I'm going to tell you a story that it's just, I don't think it'll ever leave me, actually. I hope it never leaves me. I hope I remember this forever. We were doing ministry at the end of a service, and there was this guy, and I felt God say, go over and tell him I keep no list of wrongs. And so I go over to this guy, I've never met him before, and I say, hey, I think God just wants you to know that he keeps no list of wrongs. And he falls to his knees, and he is weeping and weeping. And I pray with him for a bit, and then I'll be honest, I go to pray for other people, and then it is lunchtime. And it's all right, John was with him for a bit as well, and I thought, Lord, have mercy. And anyway, what happens is we get in the car to go for lunch, and John was like, did you see that guy that was crying? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, oh, so what had happened was it had been his birthday just the weekend before, and he had decided that as he was turning in, a whole year older, he would write a list of all the things that he had been doing wrong, all the behaviours that he was doing, all the thoughts he had, and all the different things. And at his birthday party, he was going to read it out as like a form of confession to his friends, and then he would kind of commit to not doing them the next year. And for whatever reason, it hadn't happened. He had managed to tell his girlfriend a couple of them, but he hadn't read this list of wrongs out. And then I turn up and I say to him, someone who doesn't know him, doesn't know the story, God keeps no list of wrongs. And the reason that story has stayed with me is because that man dropped to his knees, and what I got the privilege of witnessing was the restoration of God as he received the forgiveness for all the stuff that was going on, but ultimately was restored into being a child of the loving God. It's incredibly powerful to watch, but more moving when I knew the backstory. Completely and utterly restored. It was intimate, and it was vulnerable, and it was utterly beautiful. And that is what I think we get the privilege to sing when we see ministry down here. It is often intimate and vulnerable, but it is utterly, utterly beautiful to see the kingdom of God extend when people are restored and filled with the power of the living God. 1 look at yourself, and 2 looks at Jesus, the one who loves you and gave his life for you, the one who promises to give you hope and a future. As Owen said, when life feels desolate, it is Jesus, and Jesus alone, that can give you hope. That is the truth. And it is being with Jesus that means that we learn that. I think the truth is, if we really understood how much God loves us, and I've got my head around the fact I'm never going to know how much God loves me, I just know he does. But I think if we truly understood that, it would silence the voice of the enemy, silence the voice of all those who have doubted you, rejected you, judged you, silence your inner thoughts, your inner critic, as Serene sort of referenced, that voice that is a negative narrative. It would silence it every time you encounter the love of God. Because if we grasped just how deep and high and wide the love of God was for us, and how much the power of that love can transform us and other people, then wouldn't we do all we could do to spend time with the one that loves us unconditionally, forgives us in an instant, confirms our identity, and brings us into being the people we're supposed to be? Step 1 of discipleship: be with Jesus. Gaze upon Jesus with an unveiled face, as you are, knowing he meets you where you are. And why is it so important that we do that? Because unless we spend time with Jesus, we can't become like Jesus, which is step 2 of discipleship. To be human is to change constantly. We grow, we evolve, we fall in love, we fall apart, we come back together again. We can't help it. It's the very nature. We're being formed into the love and beauty of Jesus, or malformed by the disorder of sin and death. We either become agents of God's love, healing, and liberating grace, or not. I quite like that. Are you becoming like Jesus? It isn't so much something we do, I think, rather it's something that's done to us by God, as we encounter more of his grace and his love. So ask yourself this: are you becoming more like Jesus? Are you becoming more loving, kind, patient, peaceful, joyful? I think there are outward signs that we are becoming more like Jesus. For me, one of the signs that I had kind of moved forward, I guess, in my faith was quite a few years ago now. I'd been coming forward for ministry. My dad had told me I wasn't going to be loved. It had a huge, profound impact on me and really did shape how I chose to live my life. And I'd had the revelation that God really did love me, and it was incredible. It was like liquid love, I'd say, going through me. It literally transformed my little world. And part of the outworking of this was that I realised that I might have to forgive my dad. And it was like an awful feeling when I realised it, honestly. I remember a sinking sensation inside of me of like, what? And I really felt, it didn't matter what any Christian said to me about, you need to forgive your dad, you need to forgive your dad. Like, yeah, I get it, I've read that, thanks. And if you've been in a situation where you have suffered abuse, you might know how I was feeling. I didn't want to, because I didn't want to justify what had happened, and that's what I thought would happen. And then I felt Jesus say, did I forgive you? Do I continually forgive you? You are being held and bound by the stuff of your dad because you're unwilling to forgive him. He's not even in your life. So with a couple of very mature Christians, I started the process of forgiving my dad. And I can honestly say I've totally forgiven him. Forgiven him of the abuse, of the rejection, of the abandonment. Forgiven him of the impact of the lies that he spoke over me. Forgiving him for walking out, for his alcoholism. And I'm really glad that I have. Because ultimately in forgiving him, what's happened is I became more free. I think by forgiving him, I understood the depth of forgiveness that Jesus has for me, because boy, do I need his forgiveness on a daily basis. I'm not saying it was easy, and let me say again, it does not take my dad off the hook for what he did. At all. Absolutely not. It's unforgivable. That is not true. Quick catch. It didn't make what he did, it was okay. But it did release me. I became more free. And I became more free to talk about it. That's been the real joy part. I've been able to talk about my forgiveness of my dad. I've been able to talk about the impact of what he did. But greater to me and way more exciting, almost on a weekly basis, I talk to people about God being my father and how incredible that is. And it is amazing. If your dad was utterly crap like mine, don't worry. You got God. Honestly. The thing is, we become more like Jesus. The more time we spend like Jesus, I think it has this outward impact. But the reality is no one wakes up in the morning, myself including, thinks, oh, I'm just like Jesus now. No more negative thoughts, no more anger, no more lust, no more hurt, no more negative things. They just all disappeared, and I'm just like Jesus, and I'm just full of love, 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 love. No, sadly not. We've got to be intentional. We have to be intentional in becoming like Jesus. We must intentionally choose him. We must intentionally allow the Holy Spirit to transform us. And we need to, all of us, take a long-term view of this. We are always going to be a work in progress. That is the reality of it. But we hold on to a hope with Jesus that we are consistently being transformed more and more and more, and to a greater depth. It is the Spirit that transforms our character, our relationships, and our inner life. And in doing so, we become more like Jesus. The reality is, if we don't take our discipleship to Jesus seriously, the odds are we are going to continue to be formed to the patterns of the world. And if that's the case, when life gets tough, I question what we might do. I'll speak for myself. When my brother was diagnosed with cancer, I felt like my world had been upended. It was terminal, the diagnosis was bad, it had a huge fallout in my family. And I remember saying to God, yeah, but I've seen you heal, so you're going to do it, right? And me and plenty of other people prayed. The reality is my brother died. And I was left with this question. I remember when we had the third person conference with Johnny Nimmo, being at the front, Johnny was talking about healing, and I had anger bubble up inside of me. I thought, how dare you talk about this? And I know God can heal. I have seen God heal with my own eyes. And yet on that day, I was full of anger. And I went to walk out the church, and my friend Sasha grabbed me and stopped me. So you can't leave. And I was like, I'm so angry. Like, my fists were boiled. I was like, I need to go, I can't be here. And she held me, and I'm so grateful she did. And sometimes it is absolutely right to leave, and I want to give everyone permission to do that. And other times it's right to stay. And she held me, and she reminded me of the kindness of Jesus being with me. The wild thing was that whilst my brother was ill and his death after, I kept turning back to Jesus because I knew that was the one place that I might just find a bit of comfort. I kept going to Jesus over and over again, and then the wild part was I kept seeing God move in great power. I prayed for people to be healed, and they were radically healed. I saw people come to faith. At the same time, holding the tension that I was grieving the loss of my big brother, and I will continue to do so. And that is the Christian life, right? It doesn't become perfect. It doesn't mean everything's going to be all right. We've got to hold the tension of the two things. We spend time with Jesus over and over and over again, and we become more like him. And as we become more like Jesus, we get to do the things that he did. You probably know this. The Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of Acts go together. And the Gospel of Luke is an eyewitness account of the life of Jesus, containing all the stories of things he did, the healing of sick, casting out demons, all the good stuff, right? And then in the book of Acts, which I think is way more exciting personally, the book of Acts, the reason it's more exciting is because you see the disciples doing it, and they're like us. You see the disciples doing the very things that Jesus did. Not perfectly, because we're not Jesus, let's all remember that. But they did get to do it, right? And I remember when I first read the book of Acts thinking, well, if they did it, surely we can, right? And then I came here and I saw people doing it, and I thought, this is going to be fun. Jesus says in Luke 4, the Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners, recovery of sight to the blind, to set the oppressed free. And then we see him doing exactly that throughout the Gospels. And then towards the end of Matthew's Gospel, just before he goes back to heaven, he says to his disciples, I'm going to jump in, verse 18, then Jesus came to them and he said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teach them to obey everything I have commanded you. Teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you to do. And that must include healing the sick, casting out demons, proclaiming the good news of the gospel, setting the prisoners free, recovery of sight for the blind. We are a church that believes in signs and wonders. We are a church that waits on the power of the Spirit. We are a church with story after story that speaks of the goodness of the kingdom, and my word, do we need those stories. The good news is that all of us here can be used by God to do this. There's nothing special about anyone at the front that's doing it. They're just the ones that show up. They're the ones that turn up and say, God, would you use me? That was the most profound thing I learned when I started talking to all the Christians who seemed to have stories of what God was up to. They just kept showing up, just kept doing it. When days felt good, they did it, and when days felt bad, they would do it. And do you know what? Now I'm deeply grateful for those lessons. Because as I said, when my brother was dying, and post his death, I realised a little while after it was that foundation that had kicked in. The in-season, out-of-season. I hate that word. In-season, out-of-season, we do the stuff of the kingdom. We seek God. And I think one of the things that I've learned over 14 years here, you know, it's like when you're leaving somewhere, you start to reflect. One of the things I've learned is that when it feels like life's got pretty dark, when life feels heavy, when things feel pretty bleak, I have learned to turn my attention to God and expect God to move, to not be taken out. Yeah, it might happen for a bit, but you know what? So much more fun when it feels like life has suddenly got really heavy, to seek the kingdom and to see God move and to be reminded of his nature, his goodness, his goodness. When I was preparing for this talk this week, I opened up my bookshelf and this book fell out in front of me, and I looked at it and thought, I haven't seen that for a little bit. It's a prayer journal. And I opened it, and I keep all my prayer journals. It was from my first 6 months on the staff team. And every page is like, wow, God, you're amazing. All it is me seeing God move. It's literally page after page. One of them was like, prayed for someone this week with back pain, totally healed. How awesome, how amazing is God? I can feel the excitement of younger Kirsty. Looked at someone in prayer ministry, felt God say, go tell them to be a teacher. Walked over, said to them, think God might be saying to you, go be a teacher. Chris Jones used to be a worship leader here. He comes over, he says to them, think God might be telling you to be a teacher. What? God, me and him had the same word. How awesome is that? Obviously irrelevant about the person who received the word. I was mainly excited that we had the same word. But quite possibly, as a newbie to all of that, God might just be using me. The whole diary was filled with stuff like that, page after page. The thing is, I'm not where I was all those years ago, when my mind is blown by what God does. I still find it amazing. But what really came across to me when I was reading those pages was kind of the, wow, God's choosing to use me. And now I expect God to use me. So I was at a group with the people that I lead on a Monday, and we were in a room, and one of them, we were at a time of worship, and I realised that one of them has kind of turned away, and she's kind of looking out the window, and there's a real sense of God in the room, and I felt God say, I'm going to restore your voice. And she swings around and backs against the wall. Stuff I've seen loads, right? So I'm like, I know what this is. This is very exciting. So I go over, and we start praying for them. There's someone else in the room with me who's also leading. And they say, I feel like your voice is going to be restored. And I said, the sense of choking around your neck, it's just going to be gone. And she drops to the floor and starts writhing around everywhere, and it's all kind of kicking off. And afterwards, I pray for her for a bit longer, and I start speaking in tongues. And then she sits up and looks at me, and she says, you spoke my native dialect. And you spoke the opposite of the curse that was spoken over me. And when you were all praying for me, it felt like there was a grip around my neck, and that has been completely undone. That's simply because I've seen God do it so many times, right? There's nothing special about me. It's simply I choose to show up. I want to go where the excitement is. I want to see God move. I want to see people set free because I have been set free and know how good it feels. I want to see God move. And so now, 14 years later, when it happens in front of my eyes, I'm unfazed by it. I just go with it and follow and track the activity of the Spirit, which is all we're ever trying to do here. Let's do some ministry. The reality is, look, discipleship, very simple. You've got to be with Jesus. You've got to do as Jesus did. You've got to be with Jesus. You've got to become like Jesus. You've got to do as Jesus did. Very simple foundations to discipleship, okay? Very simple. We've got to show up. We've got to expect a move of God in our midst. And why don't we stand?